Hi, I'm Ju. I'm founder of DBJ Studio and the Branding 101 program. In short, I create unforgettable brands for game-changing business owners. The pivotal moment that started my business journey was probably being broke. I'm not gonna lie, when you don't have money, but you're also not really feeling the 9 to 5 life, you just realize that there has to be another way. And I think I'm the sort of person who kind of runs on this idea of there is no such thing as no for me. I am not going to accept it. I'm not going to, agree that, oh, I just have to follow the path because this is what everyone else does and this is what you're supposed to do. So I think, yeah, just wanting money, but not necessarily being like a morning person, not wanting to have to wake up and travel on the train, not always wanting to have to speak to people at, 7 a.m. in the morning. I just decided that, I'm a talented person and I wanted to go and create something of my own. I definitely think that I had been honing my skills for a long time prior to me actually deciding that I wanted to start my own business. I'd run like a hair company when I was younger, not registered, by the way. But I think starting that company, I had to make the logos. I had to, make my business cards, my flyers. And I went through several different things like that until the point when I just said, I'm not actually interested in those businesses that I'm, kind of going into. But there's something about creating it, coming up with the strategy, doing the visuals that I just loved. So eventually I just said, there has to be a name for this. Found out it was graphic design, and 6 years later, here we are. So I'm 100% self-taught. I didn't go to school for this, didn't go to uni. I actually have a law degree that has come in handy when it comes to writing contracts, but for the most part, I do not use it. So the journey to actually being where I am now, it was a lot of just kind of figuring things out for myself. I had to first learn how to use software. I had to learn, just the processes of running a business. And don't get me wrong, I'm still learning now. But I think that's the beauty of kind of starting your own thing. You go through these processes, you see what other people are doing that you want to replicate, but also things that you want to stay absolutely clear from. And I just feel that when I was 11 years old, making a logo for the very first time, I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't bad. It wasn't great, but it also wasn't bad. And I think just looking back from there and just seeing how far I've come and the different softwares I've learned to use, when people hear that I'm self-taught, the first thing they kind of say is how, because, to learn these softwares, it's not easy. But again, I don't take no for an answer. So my journey has literally just been, if the way that is standard doesn't work for me, I find another way. So let's talk about how the self-taught journey actually began. So I loved rock music when I was a young kid, right? And there was this band that I was really interested in, and I was scouring the internet everywhere just to find a wallpaper for my desktop, and I just couldn't find one. So me being me, I was like, this is insane, so I need to make one. But obviously at the time, I was using Paint on the desktop, and that was as much as I knew. My older sister, she liked to do illustrations and stuff, and so she had Adobe Photoshop on the computer, and she was like, you can use this. And I was like, what on earth is this? I'm seeing all these buttons, I'm seeing all of these tabs, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But I think that level of confusion actually motivated me to use it more. Ended up figuring out exactly what things did, how to use them. Probably wasn't even using them for their intended purpose, but I used it in a way that worked for me, right? Where I could accomplish my goal. Made the wallpaper, and I was like, this software is actually pretty cool. Obviously, a little bit of time passed. I started a clothing line, probably shouldn't because I didn't know anything about fashion at all. But I was able to create my logos on there, started making flyers. And then I realized, well, to sell the clothes, you probably need a website. So then found Wix, a platform that I absolutely cherish, and basically started teaching myself how to make websites. This was probably when I was about 16 and I'm 30 now. So over the last, 14, 15 years, if my maths is correct, I've basically just never stopped. I've continued to hone my skills. I've continued to, figure out new things. And even with Wix now, I'm actually a Wix partner, which means that I am in collaboration with Wix essentially to, create websites and to do all of these things. It doesn't happen overnight. The self-taught journey is not an easy one. It's not a straightforward one. You run into a lot of walls. There's a lot of boundaries. So I've basically just never stopped practicing. I think when it comes to the mental aspect though, of being self-taught, there is a lot of things that you have to tell yourself to keep yourself going. I remember when I first started my business, I was literally begging people to let me make their logos. I was saying, please, I'm great at it, I can do it. And obviously there were people who were like, no. But I remember the very first yes I got, I was panicking. I started thinking, oh my gosh, what if they hate it? What if I don't do this right? What if I package it wrong? What if it's in the wrong format? But it didn't matter, because at the end of the day, I am producing results and people are confident in the results that I can produce to them. So over a while, I think it was just going through the process that actually let me know, it doesn't matter if you're self-taught. If you can get the final outcome that your clients want, who cares how you get there? I definitely don't want to minimize the work that needs to be done, and the self-awareness that you need to have to recognize when you are feeling a little bit nervous or you are feeling a bit worried, and just being able to convert that negative thought into something more positive. I think there are thousands of personal circumstances that have molded my journey. I don't think that I've had the same journey as other entrepreneurs. I mean, for starters, just physically, there's a lot of limitations that my body has, blessed me with. I was born deaf in my left ear, I'm neurodivergent. So I think all of those things don't really set you up for success in today's society. I think especially the neurodivergence, I think that is exactly why the 9-to-5 life just wasn't working for me. It didn't fit the way that my brain works. It didn't allow me to, take the pauses and the breaks I needed and to do things in my own time. And so I think really working that 9-to-5 life, I was never happy there. I realized that there were a lot of things about that life that just didn't make sense. And I think especially even being a woman, when you're on your period, no one wants to go into work and do an 8-hour shift, So I think, there's a lot of circumstances that kind of contributed to me being here. But I also think that those are the same things that allowed me to get here. One thing that I would say is that when you're deaf in a world of hearing people, you have to do things slightly differently. And I think from a very young age, I learned how important body language was. I learned how important, just non-verbal communication was. And I've quickly realized that being so, confident in communicating in a non-verbal way, it's actually helped me build rapport. When I walk into a room, people feel comfortable around me. When I meet new clients, they instantly feel like, okay, Ju's my friend type of thing. So it's not just about the way that you're necessarily speaking, it's about the way that you're making people feel. And I think for a long time, I definitely thought that having a disability, I don't really call it a disability because I don't think it's disabled me in any way, but I definitely think having a disability came with a stigma. And a lot of people expect you to follow that stigma because why not? But I think I've just said, not doing that. Branding 101 is essentially a fundamentals program to teach Black entrepreneurs how to build a brand. I think a lot of people, they think a brand is a certain thing, but they actually don't know what a brand is. And I might be biased because this is what I do, but I think genuinely building a brand is the bedrock of any business. You can have the best product, you can have the best service, but if you don't know who you're selling it to and actually how to sell it to those people, you might as well keep it silent. Unfortunately, we live in a world where if you don't talk about it, if you're not showing it, then it really doesn't exist. I feel that just the statistics alone, being a Black woman and understanding that a lot of Black women in my position probably haven't made it out of, the four walls of their bedroom because they don't know what the next step is, that was irking me. On my business journey, I very much had to do things by myself. I've got siblings who thankfully are, like-minded, but it goes beyond just the people who are in your immediate circle. You need to make networks outside of your family. And I'm not trying to run a business based on clout. So it was important that if I was going through those problems or those boundaries, and I kind of had to jump over those hurdles myself and it was difficult, that means that people also who look like me are going through the exact same thing. And I don't know, maybe you could say I'm a change maker. I just don't like seeing injustice, to be honest. Maybe that's why I studied law in the first place. But I just don't like injustice. And I felt like if I can be part of a solution, why not be part of the solution? In 2020, I basically sat down, didn't know where I was going to do this, who was going to sponsor it, and I just wrote a program from start to finish, everything that I'd learned over the last 3 years, I think it was at the time, and said, I'm going to teach this to Black women. Once I had the course ready, I was like, this is pretty good. So then I started looking for spaces. We got our first partnership with Renaissance Studios in Brixton. They were gracious enough to just take the idea and say, we believe in you, you know. Did that one, did another cohort in that exact same place, but then something didn't feel right. I was kind of like, what I'm trying to give to the ladies is not being reflected in the space that we're in. And even though the space was awesome for what we were doing, I'm one of those people that says, I want more. And so if I say I want more, I'm gonna get more. And then obviously that's when we went to Sky. And yeah, we're about to do our 4th cohort soon. Working with Sky was a game changer for me. And I think the main reason why it was a game changer is because it solidified and proved everything that I'd been telling myself for years. I always knew that I was capable. I always knew that I was able to get into big rooms that most people would shy away from and probably say, yeah, maybe not now. You know, when I actually first got my partnership with Sky, it was for my Branding 101 program. And we basically said, I need a venue. I am not paying for a venue. There is not money to pay for a venue. And quite frankly, the cause that I am trying to support, which is, you know, educating Black women, because we are the least likely to run a business, yet we're 3 times more entrepreneurial than, you know, everybody else in society. I didn't feel like they should have to carry the burden of such a heavy price tag, which undoubtedly they would have to. It would have to go back into tickets. And I said, I'm not doing that. If I am here trying to support a certain group, we need to make sure that that support runs throughout everything that we do. So I approached Sky. I wasn't invited. They didn't say, yeah, come in. I found an event that they were doing. I went along to the event and I said, I'm gonna find anybody that I can and I'm gonna speak to them. I know already I can pitch. I know already my brand is spectacular. So yeah, I went in, you know, I spoke to who I need to speak to. And a year later, after a lot of going back and forth, had a meeting with the managing director of Sky Creative and we got the partnership. I think definitely when I was telling people about it, it didn't feel real. It was almost like one of those pinch me moments where you have to say, what I'm saying is actually true, or am I dreaming? Am I kind of fabricating something? But I think after a little while, it just kind of started to set in that, no, you did this. And I think from that point onwards, it was like, well, now I can do anything. There is no ceiling that's too high for me. There is no room that I can't walk into. My tattoos will never stop me. My piercings will never stop me. Having to tell people stand on my right ear because I can't hear you on my left, that's never gonna stop me, you know? So it was a game changer. I think when it comes to authenticity, I don't really know how to do things any other way. And I know that authenticity is sometimes something that people struggle with because you're always trying to match up to the industry standard, or imposter syndrome is sending you down, you know, a rabbit hole. But in all honesty, since I've been young, I've always been that standout person. I just don't know how to be anything but myself. And maybe I can attribute to the fact that wherever I was, I've always been the different one. You know, if I'm in a room of able people, I'm the one who's not necessarily able. If I'm in a workplace and everybody can sit at their laptop or computer and focus for 8 hours, I 100% cannot. If it's a situation where I was in school, for example, I'm one of 2 Black people there and the other Black person is my sister. So I think I've always been put in situations where I was different. And I think from an early age, I just kind of realized, you know, it's difficult to fit in sometimes. So just stand out. Even going forward and starting a business and things like that, I've always said to myself, you're not going to change anything about yourself. I've covered in tattoos. I've got piercings everywhere. Like, I am just not, I don't care about fitting in. And I actually enjoy my life a lot more that way, when I don't have to worry about, am I going to be accepted? Are they going to respond to me in a certain type of way? I've just made a decision that however you respond to me is how you respond to me. It's not my problem. That is something that you carry for yourself. And I think that's really helped in terms of my business, because I deal with entrepreneurs from all walks of life. And not all of them want to have this proper, polished, stereotypical professional look. And that works for me because me too, I don't want to do that. And I remember the first question that someone asked me when I told them I was going into Sky offices, oh, were you going to cover up your tattoos? And I just sat there and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And they said, yeah, but they're corporate. And I say, yeah, they're corporate. But if you're not going to accept me for who I am, you are not the sort of person that I want to work with. So that has pretty much been my ethos in life. I don't care what you think of me, you know? Obviously, everybody has insecurities. Everybody has things they worry about. But I've just realized that life's a lot sweeter when you don't, you know, let that control you. So The ultimate vision for my business is to be the go-to source for branding, development, and designs in the world. I want to make sure that whenever somebody wants to start a business or wants to revamp their business, that DBJ Studio is the person that they have in mind. I don't believe in doing things small. So branding 101, I don't just want it to stay as a UK thing, a London thing. I want to take it globally. I want to literally be synonymous with support. I'm a champion of entrepreneurs. And I just want every entrepreneur to know that they've got a safe space with DBJ Studio, that this is a judgment-free zone and that there's no amount of knowledge that you do or don't have that's going to change the way that I am with you. One thing I always say to my clients is when you're working with me, this is our business, right? Because I care about it that much. Obviously, when we're done, it goes back to you. I've got, that belongs to you now. But whilst we're working with each other, I am going to treat this as if it was my own, because that's what every entrepreneur deserves. And I think we are living in a time where businesses are popping up every 5 seconds and people are trying to realize their own freedoms and just give their lives a little bit more meaning than just kind of having to work to survive. And if I can be part of the journey for at least one entrepreneur, I'm good. So really, I've already accomplished my vision, but I would like to give that opportunity to a lot more people. So if you want to connect with me, you can go on my website, which is www.dbjstudio.co.uk. You can also follow me on social media. Everything is DBJ Studio UK. If you want to help me make my vision come true, the best way to do it is to tell a friend, right? Referrals, letting people know that we exist is really useful. I've had so many amazing conversations with people who I don't know where they came from. And it's probably because someone has spoken about me. You allow me to get into more rooms and go to more spaces and help more people. Also, if you want to support Branding 101, we are always looking for sponsors, always looking for speakers. So if you are or know somebody who is wanting to empower Black women in business, by all means, get in touch with us and we'll be more than happy to help you make a difference.